The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hey there, everybody. Thank you again for joining me for another Inventor 101 webinar. And what we're going to talk about today is we're going to talk about drawings. But before we get there, we want to make sure that we talk about templates inside of drawings a little bit. This isn't going to be a ton of detail with templates, but enough to at least get you going. And the reason we do this is the very first thing people typically ask me about drawings is, I don't like the title blocks. I need my logo in there. I need more information or less information in the title block. I don't like the little black arrows that come in from either side. So I'm going to walk you through really quickly how to create your own title block and border. They're two separate things in Inventor. And then we'll also talk about drawing views and all the different types of views that you can create. And then finally, we may get to a little bit of annotation depending on how much time we have. I want to make sure we leave time for questions because there's a lot of stuff here inside of drawings. But we will definitely talk about annotating your drawings inside of Inventor. So dimensions, balloons, bill of materials, all the different things that you need to do. So let's jump right into it, and let's switch this back over to a picture so you don't have to stare at me. And as usual, we have some resources available to you. So if you want to try out Inventor, you want to do some projects, you want to check out all the new stuff, you want to engage with the community, there's some forum and idea links there. And also, if you have any questions, as usual, make sure that you ask questions in the question panel. I have James on the line helping me out here today. Again, as usual, he will interrupt me like he always does and help me out with some of those questions. So let's get right to it. The first thing you need to be aware of, like we talked about previously, is the fact that you have different templates. So you don't just want to hit, new here in your home window, unless you've customized this to be the one that you want. But when you go to new and you hit new again, there's different templates. So you have English templates. We talked about this before. There's metric templates, and especially inside of metric, because there's so many different metric standards for detailing drawings, you have to be aware that you have, ANSI, BSI, DIN, GB. You have all these different standards that you are going to do for drawings inside of metric. So just make sure you pick the right one. And then I take that back. The very first question I get from what I said before was about templates, but the real first question that I get from folks is, what's the difference between an IDW and a DWG? So the cool thing about Inventor is you can create native DWG files if you want to, if you know you're going to be sharing your designs with other folks running AutoCAD, perhaps, vendors, other individuals inside your organization. You can very easily, just from the beginning, make a DWG as the standard drawing format. IDW is, I'm not going to say proprietary, but it's the default file format in Inventor for creating 2D documentation. So just be aware of the differences. I'm going to work inside of an IDW today. That's just the way I'm going to do it. So I'm going to start a ANSI millimeter IDW. Now, this is the second question that I typically get from folks is, I don't like the borders, I don't like the title blocks. How do I go in and modify this information? And by default, when you launch a drawing, it's going to create a sheet. The sheet has a specific size. So if you right-click in the browser on Sheet 1 and you go to Edit Sheet, this is a D size drawing. So this is a 22 by 34. You can do any variation of sizes. These are default sizes that kind of follow just about every drafting standard you can imagine. But let's say you need a custom size. You could come in here and create a custom millimeter size, and you can actually type in specific values for that particular sheet size. And when we talk about the sheet size, this is the edge of the sheet to the edge of the sheet, not the border. The border is a little bit different. So this is the physical paper size when we're talking about the sheet. So just be aware of that. You can also change the orientation from portrait to landscape. You can, move the title block to be in a different location. So all kinds of options here inside of the edit sheet. We're just going to stick with this standard D size drawing here. But when you look underneath sheet now you have a default border and you have an ANSI large. This is the actual title block itself. And the first thing I want to show you how to edit is the border, because this is a little bit easier. So inside the border, what you'll want to do if you want to make your own custom border, and once you make this, you can obviously save this into a template if you want to, but I'm just going to delete this. So I'm just going to right click on it and hit delete. So now you see the difference between the border and the title block as being two different things. Now underneath drawing resources, you have borders and you have the default border, and if you wanted to bring it in, you could just double click on it and it brings it right back in. Super easy if you accidentally delete it to bring one in. But what I want to do is create a custom one. So on the borders folder itself, underneath drawing resources, you're going to click, you're going to define a new border, and it's not super noticeable, but you're in a sketch mode now. If you look, you have line, circle, rectangle, text, fillet, hatching, patterning options, constraints. So what you're actually doing inside of this template now is you are physically drawing the border and what you want that border to look like. Things you can't change are these, or you don't want to change rather, are these lock points in the four corners. This is based off of the sheet size. So now what I'm going to do is I'm just going to draw a rectangle. This is going to be my border, and I'm going to treat this kind of like you would AutoCAD, right? You're going to come in here and dimension from here to here, and let's say I want that to be 10 millimeters, and I want from here to here to be 10 millimeters, from here to here to be 10 millimeters, and finally this bottom one, 10 millimeters. So that is now my super simple default border. There's no text, there's no black arrows, there's none of that. So if I wanted to add in some additional information, maybe some match lines or some zones, you would just come in here and sketch those just the exact same way you would any other thing. I could come in here and create these. I'll add a few zone lines. So I'll snap to that midpoint and to there. I'll do the same thing over here, midpoint and there, and same thing right here, midpoint and there. So now I have these four zones, my super simple. I'll finish the sketch. Now when you finish the sketch, it asks you now for the name of this border because you've just created a custom border. I'm going to call this Luke. You can name it whatever you want to name it, obviously. And now I have a new custom border inside of my border folder. What I can do now is just double click on Luke, and it automatically makes that my default border. And you may not have noticed it, but my title block locked in to the lower right hand corner. I'm going to hit undo once just so you see it. So that title block is positioned for the previous border. The title blocks automatically locate in a default location, and by default it's the lower right. So when I activate this, it moves it down. The other thing this does is when I edit this sheet, if I want to move that title block to a different location, it automatically locks it into that corner. That's just some default things that happen inside of Inventor. So really, really easy to do, really easy to work with. And I'm actually going to put that back where it was, edit the sheet, lower right hand corner. So borders are super easy. You can make as many as you want. You can make them as complicated as you want. Borders typically don't have a ton of information on them other than just a little bit of geometry. Now title blocks these get a little more complicated. And I'm going to go through this pretty quickly. If you do need custom borders made and custom title blocks, I'd really encourage you to work with an expert on this because there's a lot of info in here. The way I'm going to do this is I'm going to show you just by editing the default. So I'm just going to edit the definition here. So inside of here. And now whenever I take a look at this, you see a ton of dimensions. They're all kind of overlapping one another. And the challenge here is you're literally defining the location of every single line, the location of every single piece of text. So that's why you see so many dimensions on here, is because whoever created this template was very specific where they wanted the text to be placed, very specific where they wanted the lines to be placed. Some of these lines are sketch-only lines. Some of these are actual physical lines. So any lines you see here in this kind of light blue color, these are what are called sketch-only lines. So these lines only show up in this sketch. They disappear when I exit the sketch. And they're used for alignment purposes. A lot of times whenever you're working with text, it makes it a little bit easier if you use these lines to kind of get an idea of where things are located, to lock things into position. You could have done this with just a bunch of dimensions, but just keep that in mind. Another thing too, when you're editing and creating these, anytime you see text that is in a bracket, so company, title, manufacturer, approved dates, part number. I'm going to use part number. I'm just going to double click on this. So this is a property. So when you see a bracket around a piece of text, what that means is it's automatically pulling that information from somewhere. So in this case, it is a property of the drawing. So that's the property it's pulling over. So in the drawing, when I fill out the I properties and I put in part number, it's going to automatically fill this in for me. The same thing happens with any one of these. Now they might not all be part or properties of the drawing. They could be properties of the model. Model has everything from appearance to part number on its own. So if you want to automatically pull information from the model, you want this information to reference model properties. If you want it to reference what you physically type in the drawing, you want to make sure that it is properties of the drawing. And there's also stuff for physical properties of the model. If you're doing sheet metal, there's really specific sheet metal. There's a few sheet metal properties that are in here by default, but it's typically going to be a property of the drawing or a property of the model, and just kind of be aware of when you're creating those. But what I want to do is I want to create an area for a logo in here. So all I'm going to do is a real simple kind of 2-point rectangle. I'm going to put a logo over here to the right because, again, this is something that folks are always asking about. The other thing, too, is there are layers when you're doing this. So I want to actually make sure that I put this on the appropriate layer. So this is going to be a continuous layer. I can come in here and I can change the weight of that particular line. And let's say that my logo is going to be just a handful of concentric circles. Maybe that's my logo, I'm not sure. When I finish that sketch, I'm going to hit yes, and now I have this particular logo. So that logo area could be text, it could be an image, it could be anything that you want to put into it, because remember, this is just a regular sketch. So when I edit this definition, you can hatch inside of here, you can place an image inside of here. So just about anything you want to put for a logo, any modifications you want to make, can all be done at this template level and then saved as a default template. That was a big mouthful. That's templates. That's how you edit them. That's how you create them. And then once you do that, you can obviously save this, so you can actually create your own brand new one. I was editing a default one, but if I wanted to, I could go to title block, define a brand new one, and then inside of here, I could actually sketch what my title block looks like and have that set. So So that's templates, and I'm going to actually get rid of that and bring in that default template back. So let's get to creating some drawing views. Unless there's any questions, if you had any questions on those templates, James, I'm not sure if anybody asked any, but if you have any questions, just ask them in the questions panel.
Nope. All good so far.
Okay, good, good. So no questions on templates. Everybody is a template expert, apparently. Okay, so a couple things whenever you start to create your drawing views. You could come in here and create a base view, and you could go find a document. Some people like to do that. Personally, I kind of like to have my models open that I'm going to work with. So I'm just going to open a model here. And I'm just going to go to my home so I can see, and I want to work with this assembly right here. Now, if you have multiple files open, whichever one is active, so if you have a part file that you were in most recently, when you do the drawing, it will be of that particular model. So let's change this over, and let's make sure this all looks good. And there we go. Okay, good. So now that we have our model that we want to work with, when we create our drawing view now, so when we do our base view, a couple different ways to do it. Again, I tend to do things either off a right click or a keystroke. So base view is where everything starts. This allows you to create those default base views. So I'm just going to right click base view. It knows that I have an assembly file open, so it searches out and looks for that particular assembly file, and it automatically starts to place that view. You could come in here and change what you want that base view to be. So using this view cube here in the kind of upper right above that model, I can actually come in here and change what I want that view to look like. So I can basically choose how I want that to be positioned. It's all based off of the 000 of the file that you're bringing in. So if you brought it in kind of a funny orientation, or you built the assembly in an orientation that later on didn't make sense, you can very easily change that. So I like this front view here. My right side view, actually I take that back. I'm going to use that as my front view. So that view's there by default. Now you see these windows popping up whenever I hover to the right and left and up at an angle. It allows me to create projected views at the same time. So I could hit OK and create this base view, but I really want to, I know I'm going to have a right view, a top view, and an isometric view of this. So what I should do is I should just create that base view. I'll switch over to here. I'll do a right side view, pick where I want it, a top view, pick where I want it, and an isometric view right about there, pick where I want it. Now I'm going to hit OK. And now it's going to generate all of those views at the exact same time for me. So I don't have to go in and create individual views of those. And now we can go in and start to manipulate, change those views, maybe add some section views. Maybe I want to adjust the scale. So a couple things to be aware of is when you're creating these views, these right side and top views, they are directly related to that original base view. So I can't move this anywhere except horizontally because it's a projected view. Same thing with the top view. The isometric view, however, once it's placed, you can kind of move it anywhere. You can do just about anything you want with this view. I'm also going to change the scale of this, and this works for just about any view. If you right click on it and you hit edit view, and there's your scale. So you could put in a specific scale, you could just kind of eyeball the scale, however you want to work with those particular scales. It is dynamic, so as you change the scale, if you give it a second, you'll see the difference in size as you start to adjust the scale factor. So once you get the scale you want, I also want my isometric view to be shaded. So here underneath style, we have the hidden line removed, and shaded. I will make that shaded, and I will hit OK. So what that's now going to do is increase the size of that view, and it's going to shade that view for me by default. When I move my base view now, so I want to start making some room on my screen for some other things, maybe some balloons or some bill of materials. Whenever I move my base view, my front view and my right view and my top view move along with it. Again, it's supposed to happen that way. If for some reason you do ever need these views not to be aligned, if you right-click inside one of these views and you hit Edit View, there is a, I'm drawing a blank on where it is, Scale from Base and my Style from Base. Ooh, the alignment. Underneath the display options, you can uncheck the align to base option. So now when I hit OK, that's still a right side view, but it actually can be anywhere. And the interesting thing that it does, you know, drafting standards, that shouldn't be that way unless there is a view annotation telling you where that view is coming from. So it automatically creates that view annotation for us. I'm going to undo that because that's not really great drafting practices to do that. So let's just undo that a couple of times and get that back to where we wanted it. There we go. So that's your very simple base and projected views. Now you can also create projected views from other views if you wanted to continue to do some drawing view creation. So I'm going to just make a little bit of space here, and I'm going to move my view to the center, and let's say this drawing really needs a left side view because it's not symmetrical. There's a lot of detail here. What I can do is I can do a projected view. It's going to ask what view does it want to be selected from. So in the very left-hand corner of my screen down here, it says Select View. This is kind of like your command line. I may not have mentioned that in some of the previous sessions, but Inventor in that lower left-hand corner tells you what to do next in that lower left-hand corner. So as you issue commands, that's kind of your reminder or your note of what to do next. So what view do I want to project? I want to come from this view. I want to do a left side view. Right click, create, and now I have not only a left, a right, and a top, and I could continue to do that for other views as well. I could do a projected view if for some reason, not a ton of reason to do this, but let's say I did this one here, I could do a top view. You know, maybe that's the actual view that I wanted. This one here maybe doesn't make a lot of sense, or maybe you need both of them for whatever reason. That's the really cool thing about working with a 3D model and creating your drawing views. These views are free. You're not, you know, in AutoCAD creating 2D drawings and you do a whole entire drawing view and realize you need a different one. You can just delete it. I can just right click here and I could delete this view or suppress the view or whatever I want to do. I'm just going to suppress that view. And you can see in my browser I have a view there that's suppressed. So I could also just delete that view if I didn't want the view. So if you think you might use it later, you can suppress it. If not, you can just delete it. Okay, so that is some basics with your base view and projected view. The next one that I want to talk about, I kind of need a special model to do this with. So I'm going to open up a model that I was working on the other day to do this. And this is a projected view for a component. Again, there's typically a line that defines the projected view. So I'm going to come in here and create a new drawing. and D size is a little big. So next thing, your sheet size by default in Inventor is going to be a D size. So if you want to change that, you can right click, edit sheet. I'm going to switch this to be an A size. And then the problem happens, I got this huge title block, right? So I can just delete the title block. Underneath my title block resources now, I have a little ANSI A title block, and it's a much smaller title block for obviously an A size drawing. And actually A size is maybe a little too, let's edit the sheet, and let's do a B size drawing. That's probably giving me a little more space. That's a little better. I'll do a base view. It knows because that particular model was open last that that's the one I want to work with. I'll create some projected views. And what I can do now is, again, just move these where I want to move them to. But if I want to create a view that looks maybe directly at that particular face right there, like I don't need that view. Let's actually delete that view right there. I can do what's called a auxiliary view of this, and what it's looking for is a line to be parallel with. So what I did there, now I'll do that a little slower. So I'll do auxiliary of this view, and it lets you do the identifier for it, allows you to adjust the scale. But what it's looking for right now, it says select the linear model edge to define the view orientation. Whenever I pick this line right here, or any one of these lines, it just needs to be one of those lines. What it's going to do is create a perpendicular, so perpendicular to that view. So now I have an exact perpendicular view to that particular web right there of that drawing. I can come in here, and if I wanted to turn the labels on, I could turn the labels on. You just got to hit the light bulb whenever I do that. If you don't want the labels on, you can just right click, edit your view, and shut the light bulb off. You can also edit those labels if you want to kind of go in and change those. We'll talk about that when we get into annotation a little bit later. But that is your auxiliary view. The next one that I want to talk about is the section view, and I'm going to use actually both of these drawings to demonstrate that one. Again, if you have any questions, if you just joined us, make sure you ask any questions in the question panel. So I'm going to go back to this drawing here. And the next drawing view that I want to talk about is a section view. And I'm going to delete this right side view. And I'm going to create a section view right through the center or somewhere specific in this view. So again, I'm going to issue the section view. What view am I going to create a section of? I pick inside that view. You see that little highlight show up. Now what it's looking for is the line that's going to define the section. It says enter the endpoints of the section line. I'm going to pick a point here, pick a point here. Now, I could continue to click, but as long as I have those two endpoints, if I right-click now and I hit continue, it's now going to draw a section view of that particular component. And then here's where it starts to get pretty cool. I'm going to delete this view. And if you take a peek here, you can see the section view that it's cutting through all that different material, so it's adding in the hatching for me. And the cool thing is if I move my section line, so let's move it right down the center of that, it's going to automatically section everything in that view. So that section line is dynamic once it's been created. And here's a really cool part. If I right click and I do a projected view from the section view, it's actually going to be a sectioned isometric view. And there is my sectioned isometric view. I can come in here and edit this view. I can shade it. Couple things that are going on here. So the section view, for some of these components, it's not sectioning all the way through. You can choose what to include in the section, what to exclude in the section. So there's different options. That's why some of these are sectioned through, some of them are not sectioned through. So that's a straight section line. But there's also sections where they're rotated. So if I go over to my drawing view, and let's say I want to create, and I'll actually delete this view here. So let's say I want to do a section view that passes through the center of this and then maybe hits another one of these centers and then passes through another one. I can right click, I'll do a section view. I'm going to hover over that center so I can pick it up. So I'm going to pick a point here. I'm going to go to the center line and then I'm going to highlight over that. It'll pick up a parallel. Because I touched that line right there, it allows me now to pick up a parallel constraint to that. I'll hit continue and I will create my rotated section view of that particular drawing view. And then again, I can start to create those projected views of sections. And actually in this case, I think because it's a rotated section, it doesn't like creating that. Can I do a projected, a rotated section? No, it doesn't like it. Super easy to create those section views. They can be as detailed as you want them to be. You can add as many sections to that as you want. And that is your section view inside of Inventor. The next one that I want to show you, this is a detail view. So let's go back over to this drawing, and we get into situations all the time where we need a better view of a particular component. Let's see if I have a better part to work on with this. So let's go to this guy right here. So this is just a sheet metal component that I was working on the other day. So we'll create a drawing of this. And this was a metric. And we'll do a base view. And let's change that scale to 2. So now let's say I want a little more detail on maybe one of these countersink holes perhaps that we're working with. What I can do is inside of my detail view, you pick what view you're going to do the detail in, and then what you're picking is either two different shapes. The default shape is a circular shape. You could do a rectangular detail. I think most folks do circular. So the center of that detail is going to be right about there. I can choose how I want to display my cutout. It can be a jagged or a smooth. I can add a connection line if I wanted to. And I can create that particular detail view of that particular object. And then the cool thing is, as this detail view moves, my detail view automatically updates. I can drag my geometry or my annotation to perhaps be somewhere else. I can adjust the scale of this. So really, really easy to do. Another thing you could do with this perhaps is, let's say you wanted to annotate a bend inside of here, or a radius. You could really bump up that detail view. So I'm going to do a detail view here, and I'm going to do a really big scale on this, just to get that to be as large as I can. I'll do a cutout, and so you can see that detail there. If I move that detail to the left corner, my detail automatically updates. And then here's the cool part. Whether I dimension it, and I'm just going to do 2 dimensions in 2 different locations, whether I dimension it here, and it's a 1 inch or a 1 millimeter radius, or I dimension it here it's also going to be a 1 millimeter radius. It automatically knows the scales for you. It knows how you've scaled them up or scaled them down. So really super useful tool is that detail view. Going to see if there's any questions on the line, even if you just make one up for me, James, perhaps. I'm sure you're eagerly listening to all this, James, learning about it.
Actually just got one in here, and that's, could you email me the recording? This person says he hasn't received the last two, but it should be automatically sent, correct?
Yes, yeah. So what's happening? Yeah, so you will get an email. The challenge is because this one was created as a series, we can only send you one email recording. If you actually just go to YouTube, if you can, hopefully you're not somewhere where it's blocked. If you go to YouTube and you just Google, go to YouTube and just search for Inventor Luke, all of the Inventor 101 videos have been uploaded to the Inventor Luke YouTube channel. You can also find it on Facebook, Twitter. We have all the links to all the videos, and if you still can't get it that way, just send me an email at luke.mihalsik@autodesk.com. It's all my detail information. I'll actually put it right. I think I have it in there. No, I don't have my email, but the email is in the invitation. Just email me, and I can make sure that I get you a link or a version of that download if you're still not getting it from the YouTubes. Okay. So that is the bare bone basics of annotation, and I'm sorry, not annotation, of drawing view creation inside of Inventor. There's not a ton to it. I'm going to show you two more that I really like. This is the break view and the breakout view. And what these allow you to do is work with, if you have very long components and you need to fit them on a page, the break and the breakout lets you see inside of things. So so let's grab a component here that we want to work with. We'll set our component priority to part level, and I want to grab this I-beam right here. So here's my beam that I'm working with. It's not overly long, but I could maybe fit this on a drawing in one view. But what I'm going to do is create a new millimeter drawing, and I'm going to do a base view. Again, it knows because that beam was the last one that I worked on. And there's my view. Change my scale. Ooh, that's way too big. And maybe 0.25. There we go. And I'm going to just place that view. And this, and you start to run out of space. You know, sometimes whenever you have these, overly, long components. But one thing you can do with these components or these views is you can create what's called a break view. And what the break view allows you to do is you can take a long view and you can decide where you want this break to happen. I'm going to do a jagged style break with a small gap. The orientation is a horizontal or a vertical. I want to do obviously a horizontal orientation. So I pick a point and I want to trim that much out of it. I'll do that again. I'll pick a point and I want to trim that much out of it. Now here's the coolest part of this. Let me undo just so you believe me. So if I put a dimension on here and I dimension, from this point, to that point. So the overall length in here is, 1900 millimeters and some change, right? When I add these break views, it knows that that is still 1900 millimeters and some change. So it automatically allows you to, work with those overly long components that you need to fit on the drawing. And then when you want to get rid of that break view, you can just right-click on it and you can delete the break. Make sure the break is highlighted and not the window, and it will get rid of that break. It also adds the appropriate annotation to your dimension to let you know that is a broken view. So again, a really cool piece of functionality with the dimension. The next one that I want to mention is the Breakout View, and I think this is a good component to do this one with. Let's see if we can get this to work with this one. I think this guy is hollow, if I recall. And it's probably not hollow, hindsight. Let's open up. I have an assembly here that we could work with. Let's open up this assembly. That's what happens when you don't store stuff all in the same file. I knew that was going to happen. Oh yeah, this is what happens whenever you don't use project files correctly. And let's go to this one here. You think I would have tested this stuff ahead of time? Okay, so we're going to do a drawing of this kettle. And let's do an ANSI millimeter. We'll do a base view. And our scale is a little off, so let's just adjust our scale to 0.375. There we go. So what a breakout view allows us to do is if you have an object that has internal components and you want to see inside of that without turning hidden lines on, what you can do is a breakout view. And I'm going to do a breakout view of this side. Oh, helps if I have a sketch there. Oh, I didn't do my sketch ahead of time. Let's try that again. And let's do right there. And now let's try that breakout view. There's my, so I forgot to do my sketch ahead of time. So what it was looking for was you need to define where you want that breakout view to happen. So there's a profile for that particular breakout. And what it's going to do is it's going to take that profile and basically cut that material away in that view. So whenever I do this closed loop, it's going to basically dig inside of this particular component as deep as I tell it to. So I'm going to just say it's going to go in, 6 inches, and you can pick a specific point that you want it to go to. So I can go from point, and I'm going to just pick a point on this side view right here. So from that side view, it's going to go in that far. So it's going to go in 6 inches there, that circular profile, and you'll now see inside of that kettle, and it kind of looks a little odd. Let's do a projected view of this so you can see what that looks like. Yeah, I didn't do it exactly how I thought it was going to do it. And let's create, but you can see how that, that's because it didn't go in deep enough. Let's try that breakout view. Let's edit that. And let's make that go in 24 inches. There we go. So now we can start to see what's happening with that breakout view. And actually, if I wanted to, I could take that all the way to the center. It will remove material you may not want to remove. So if I come in here and I go in, 48 inches, it's probably going to start to run into that nozzle. So just be aware when you do that breakout view, number one, you need a sketch that defines kind of what you're breaking out, and then there is a depth for how far that breakout view is actually cutting into that particular component. So just keep that in mind whenever you're doing it. I I think that is going to do it for, yeah, we're right at 45 minutes just about. So I didn't think we'd have time to get to annotation, so we will save most of that for next week. So don't forget to check us out next week. We're going to do a webinar. This will be the last one next week for this 101 series, and it's going to be all about annotation. So we'll talk about dimensioning, setting up your dimensioning styles. We'll talk about ballooning, bill of materials, adding just general notes and those sorts of things inside of your drawings. And that really should wrap up just about everything. There's all kinds of other stuff, obviously, that we can do with Inventor, but just the basics, this should kind of get you enough to get you going. So I hope you come back. Don't forget to check us out on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram, and also on YouTube. I should probably add that link in there as well. And before we wrap it up, any last-minute questions out there, James? I wasn't looking.
No, sir.
Okay, pretty quiet crowd today. All right, everybody, I appreciate it. I will talk to you next Thursday. Bye now.